All right, so the Eric Vargas podcast, the Eric Vargas Experiment, Mishka outside, number 8, Abby Jones. I am very excited to have this conversation and just talk. I feel like we are very similar, and I think we proved that as of recently. We took some personality tests, and it turns out we are very much similar to one another. Never lacking depth between us. I also want to mention that, I hope to repeat many topics that we've already talked in the past, because this is in a sense the first time we will have talked about those conversations, and I find so much value in the way we speak. So don't let that stop you from repeating things that you've already told me before, because I do think it is of extreme value. But yeah, me and Abby met at work through my tech, and we really, I think, hit it off as soon as we started doing the robotics club at Foster Elementary School. So that's kind of some background as to how me and Abby came to be here across the table. And also another house maintenance rule I need to get out the way is the word of the day. So basically, the point of my podcast, or what I want this podcast to be, is basically a way where if anyone tunes in, they will gain something out of it. And that something is basically a word. So bare minimum, you're coming out of here slightly better person in vocabulary. And I need you to choose between the two words that I have. For whatever reason, I recorded these a couple days ago. And the first word is altruistic. And the second word is draconian. I don't know if you know any of those words or if you've heard those words before, but I'm going to let you choose. And also, bonus points if we use any of those words in our conversation. So, which one do you prefer?
I feel like I know more about altruism, so.
Draconian?
Yeah.
All right, draconian is rigorous, usually severe or cruel. So, yeah.
It's like the opposite of altruistic almost.
In a sense, it is. Draconian was I want to say, a Greek philosopher that took everything super serious. So it was like, his name was Draco, also called Dracon, was the first recorded legislator of Athens in ancient Greece. He replaced the prevailing systems of oral law and blood feud by a written code to be enforced only by court law. So he was a fucking asshole, I bet. Just no leniency with this guy. You basically, if you didn't shake someone's hands or you didn't bless someone when they sneeze, you're going to jail, is kind of what I'm getting the sense of. But apart from that, I think the logistics are out of the way. Usually everyone that I have a podcast with, I let them choose a drink. I know I told you I was going to get craft beers, but my day just got kind of busy, so I didn't get craft beers. And I got a Chateau Saint Michel, or whatever, from the Columbia Valley. And it's a Riesling. And from what you have told me, you've actually been here, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, to the winery. And we had this wine. It was our favorite. We actually took some home.
And just a segue there, I guess at this point, I'd love to hear an elevator speech of Abby. Like, what is that? What does that look like? You just met someone, you're in Dubai, the tallest tower in the world. You're going to the top floor. What is your elevator speech? Who's Abby?
I grew up in Alaska. I think that's important because it's definitely a unique way to grow up. I love sports. Played every sport. Played my whole life. I love the challenge of them. I played cross country, volleyball, wrestling, basketball, track and field. I threw in track and field. I went to college in Washington and then down in Oregon. I also played basketball and did track and field in college. And then I majored in computer science. And then I lived in Seattle for a little while, and then I moved to Denver. That's where I am now. So that's just kind of, I guess, more logistics. I think of myself as a fairly dreamy, philosophical, theoretical person. I'm realizing that I enjoy living in the current world, but specifically the more philosophical, magical parts of the world, which is still the world because it's real, but it's not a perspective that everybody has. I'm a very gray area person, not very black and white. I think there are very few black and white aspects about the world, and even if you give me a black and white aspect, I probably could find a gray area. I come from a really big family. I have 5 siblings. I'm third out of 6. And I think in a lot of ways that position in the lineup mixed with my very kind of peacemaker personality, for anybody into personality types, Enneagram 9. And so that combination made me a very big people pleaser. I don't have a lot of strong preferences because I think for a long time life was easier if I just kind of did what everybody else did and went with the flow, and I don't have like a lot of strong preferences, but that's something I'm learning about myself now, is that I do. And as I've kind of made that jump out of the more structured high school, college, you know what you want to do in your life, you know what you think you know what you want to do in your life, everything's kind of put in place for you. Like, you can check the boxes, like, oh, I'm getting good grades, I'm being nice to people, I'm being active, which was easy because you could just sign up for a sport or something like that. And as you get out of that, you're like, oh, actually the world doesn't really have all these boundaries on what you're supposed to do, and it doesn't have as many expectations as I thought, so I got to figure that out for myself. And so I've been on that journey for a little while, and yeah, that's where I'm at now.
Excellent.
Yeah.
And you mentioned your personality traits, and I guess there's a couple tests, and it's actually pretty, I guess, fresh in our minds because we both took them during our lunch meetings, which I think are the best things ever for
I know.
those that don't know. Henry, myself, and Abby are all part of a My Tech 1 hour lunch thing, quotes, or 1 hour. Air quotes, yeah, absolutely, yeah, 1 hour around there. And we basically just talk life and get into each other. We're like each other's almost therapists in a sense at times, right? Because I think we've gone to the point where we're above the surface level, and now kind of we're just all muddling and trying to figure out what this thing called life is. And it's a great time. It's almost like a podcast in it of itself. I feel like we've made that reference many times, that we should literally just record them and just post them and see what happens, right? Yeah. But certain things you just got to keep to yourself. But recently, as in yesterday, we all took personality tests. For those who are curious or interested in that, I 100% recommend. I feel like there's so many things I learned about myself that I could never put words to. Like, I was like, I kind of knew this was a thing about me, but I could never put exact words as to like how to describe it. And also a lot of things that I feel like I can improve about myself that I didn't necessarily want to have. So I think it's one of those things that everyone should at least try to take it. And nowadays it's free. I think 16 Personalities was my preferred favorite between that one and the Enneagram, I think it's called. And I personally like the 16 Personalities just because of the cartoons and like the way they describe things. So for sure, I recommend that to everybody. But one thing that you mentioned during that whole thing is how your personality, and just to reference both of ours, or mine is ENFP, and yours was INFP. So basically the only difference was that the leading letter, which is introvert or extrovert. And do you remember the rest of the words or the letters? So the E or I is introvert or extrovert. Then it's N or S, observer or intuitive. And then after that is
T or F,
thinker or a feeler. And then after that is P or J, which is either a judgmental or
prospecting,
right? So, and one thing you had mentioned is how your personality has changed just in that letter. But overall, I mean, pretty consistent. I would say that was 100% really consistent, except for you just became a little bit more introverted. Yeah, I guess what are your thoughts on that? Is there something that you think caused that, or?
Yeah, I think, first of all, disclaimer, a lot of people I've found when you start talking about personality tests, like, just kind of want to chew it apart because in general, I think a lot of people like to poke holes in things, and there's some good to that, but but specifically very black and white people will look at like a personality test and they're like, this is kind of like crazy. Like, how can you narrow down, all the billions of people in the world into 16 or 9 different personalities? And they might read it and find one thing that they disagree with and be like, oh, it's not true. But for me, even just taking the test in general has been really beneficial, because just the questions that they ask you, like, oh, are you this type of person? And then you have to, answer on like a scale of disagree to agree. And there's a lot of questions that you just don't ask yourself. Like one of the random questions was, when you make friends, do you soon, like, when you become close with someone, do you soon after wonder when you'll disappoint them? And I was taking this test with someone else one time, and they read that question and they were like, what the heck, this is such a random question. I happened to relate with that question a lot, because that's a trait that I've noticed in my life, is that as soon as I get close to someone, I just expect that I'm gonna let them down, disappoint them, something like that. So right there, it's a good example of even just taking that time to think about yourself and to analyze what you think, what you feel, all that kind of stuff. But yes, like you said, I have probably taken the Myers-Briggs, which is like the 16 personalities one, like 10 to 15 times over the last 10 to 12 years. And every single time I've always tested ENFP. And this was the first time, and probably the first time I've taken it in probably 3 years, where I got a different result and I got the INFP. And I think that it's because of that transition that I talked about earlier, where growing up I was pretty extroverted. I wanted to be an actress. I was super out there. I loved doing funny accents, loved making people laugh. I found a lot of my identity in what people thought about me. And so and growing up in a really small town in Alaska, everything and you know everything about everyone. And so it's very easy to control that image. Like, oh, I can be this way around these people and this way around these people. And not a different person, but you can highlight different elements of your personality. And I think I'm pretty good at going with the flow, mixing, blending. I like a lot of things. I like to do a lot of different things. And then going into college, I always had a very specific role. At my first college, I naturally just became tutor of the girls and boys basketball team. I was the team captain. I was that just fell really naturally coming out of high school. And so I just continued to fill that role. I was the commencement speaker and all of that. And then I think as much as I was trying to be introspective about myself and analyze all of that, there was a certain level that I didn't have to, because you're so busy. There's so many things in your path. There's so many ways to be like, ooh, I don't know if I'm feeling great, but hey, I got good grades, or I have these friends, or I have this relationship. All these things are going well. So it's pretty easy to mask that stuff. And then getting out of college, I really went on this deep journey of what the heck do I want to do with my life? Well, in order to know what I want to do with my life, I have to have a better understanding of who I am. And I started really diving into self-improvement. I found Tony Robbins during that time, and he has a lot of podcasts, books.
Can we actually tangent to that, your experience? I feel like I've never heard the full story.
Yeah, so I was on a trip one time, and I was just talking to somebody who was an entrepreneur, and they were...
Trip where?
To Mexico.
Gotcha.
And
solo trip? How'd you end up going there?
I have some friends that actually are friends that part of the reason why I moved to Denver is because they lived here. They've since moved, but they were going on the trip. So I just went with them. I didn't know anybody else. It was a birthday party trip. There was probably 15 people there. We had this beautiful mansion on the cliff in Puerto Vallarta. It was
that's awesome.
It was beautiful. It was 7 stories. Right, it was it was really amazing. And and everyone on the trip was really awesome. But there was this one guy, Fat. Was his name.
Fat was his name? Shut up.
Phat, yeah.
Okay, I thought you were describing him like that. I was that's fucking insensitive.
No, yeah.
Yeah, there was this guy. He was fat, but
no,
I was damn.
No, he's the guy who wakes up in the morning and he's mixing all his pills and powders and
gotcha
supplements, measuring them all out. And he was just really into self-improvement, and that was the first time I really got exposure to supplements and to he was out on the deck every morning, doing these breathing exercises, and I'm so I got to talking with him, and I was talking a lot about my different interests, and he was yeah, dude, you should check out Tony Robbins.
So was he a mutual friend, or you actually knew him, and then you just you discovered a new level?
No, I had never met him before.
Gotcha.
Yeah, I just knew this couple, the Tyners. Yeah. So this guy was a friend of their friend. I don't think they had met him before either.
Okay.
But he suggested it. And then I went back home, and that was like the first time I'd really been around people who were taking like a non-conventional path. Like they were investing in real estate and starting apps and like that kind of mindset.
Mm-hmm.
And this was in 2016, so it was before, like obviously there was a lot of people doing it at that time, but it was before it was like so mainstream like it is now. And so I went back home and I started looking into that stuff, and then I realized like Tony has these conferences. The easiest one, the one that's most frequent throughout the year, is Unleash the Power, UPW, Unleash the Power Within. And it was sick. It's like 12,000 people in a stadium, and it's just all emphasized like energy and state and how you want to be in a positive state, and you can like change your physiology to do that, and like you can change your focus. And I wouldn't say that it was like so life-changing. It was kind of more like church camp, if you know what I mean, in the sense of you go to church camp, you feel like you got this little spark to like change the world, and then you go back to school and you still kind of have it, but like it just kind of,
I feel like society just rubs it away,
and like life gets in the way, and but the lessons that I learned were like super fundamental, and the investment in myself was really big, you know, because it's not, that conference isn't super expensive, but it's not cheap. And
where was it?
It was in San Jose.
San Jose?
Yeah.
Okay.
It's a cool place. I like that place a lot.
Texas. San Jose, Texas. San Jose. California. I feel like there's a Texas that has San Jose in it for whatever reason. I was like, there's there.
Sounds right, yeah.
I thought you did. I thought it was in Australia for whatever reason. I thought.
So then I signed up for more.
Gotcha. Okay, I'm jumping the gun here.
No, then I did Life and Wealth Mastery in Fiji. And
that sounds so dope.
Yeah, so that's like a 6-day conference with like 50 people, and you stay at the place. Like Tony has a resort in Fiji, and kind of like a community that he supports there.
That boy's cashing in every time too. He's like, tax money, tax write-offs here, there, and I'm gonna have you stay at my resort. I mean, he's trying to teach you. He's trying to get you to get to that level. I understand. So applause to that. He's living that life.
Yeah. So and that's like a big part about it, is that it's also that it's like you're around these people that are just doing like amazing things with their lives, and it's a great networking tool. I was not necessarily at the point in my life where I necessarily could network with people, both because I didn't know what I wanted to do financially, career-wise, but also like I don't know, I just felt like I needed to do a little bit more internal growth before I like partnered with someone.
Would you say you compared yourself too much to the rest of the group, and you were like, I don't have too much to offer compared to them? Or is that just me just thinking
yes and no.
One reason or like some reason?
Yes and no. I think partly there was a certain level of that, but there's a certain level too that like I'm not a huge fan of like long distance friendships. Fair enough. Yeah, and I have 3 sisters, so I feel like I already have enough, and mom, so I feel like I have enough like people in my life that are close, and I have to communicate with all.
I think I recall your profile says something about like having a tight inner circle, right? Is this true, or did I just not recall that correctly from the?
No, it did say that. Yeah, which I thought was interesting, because I've always kind of thought that I'm the person that would rather have like a bunch of shallow friends that are in like a ton of different areas. But I think that more stems from an unwillingness to be vulnerable, and it's easier to always have people like you and to not be vulnerable if you always just have like surface level friends who are happy to see you when they see you, and they fill a role. So I have friends who I play sports with. I have friends who, you know, are like my set of girlfriends. I have friends who I hang out with to watch games and to like go to weekend parties with. I have friends to have deep conversations with. But for the most part, up until our like lunch conversations, I keep things like pretty surface level. So I guess it's true. Like, but once I find someone who it's like, yes, you're my kindred spirit, you're the person like I really want to hang around, then I'll never let you go, and we'll be friends. But you have to be okay with like not a lot of communication. And
I suck at that.
If you expect like a lot, especially if it's long distance, like if any of my friends ever watch this, sorry, I'm horrible at communicating. But,
I don't think there's nothing to apologize regarding that. It's just also certain other personality types really do value communication and like constant checkups, which is not something that, or I think another gray area, right? We're not like, oh, you should be this way or this way, right? Because I'm very much the same way. Where I think certain times you have to learn from the opposite side. So for me, I usually don't communicate too much. I like to start group like messages, but I'm not the one that like once it's going like, oh, let's go do this and this and that. I used to be like that. Now I'm very much like observant and like yes or no, like, oh yes I can do that, no I cannot do that. But I think something that one of my friends, Will Osborne, taught me is to kind of check in on people, like just check in on them, just a quick like, yo, how's it going, how's work, cool. You could be surface level. I think a weakness for me, or it's a blessing and a curse. I'm starting to get the gist of it, right? Which is like getting too deep, or like I feel like sometimes like I'm now not really able to have surface level conversations, which I'm okay with, but it also makes me dread having like a simple chat with someone, you know, like sending them, or like just calling someone on the phone and being like, yo, what's up, like how's it going, everything good, everything chill. Like I just can't, like my conversations will go for like an hour, 2 hours, because I just can't be quick about it. Yeah,
and that's probably one of the biggest reasons why I don't communicate is more often is because like if I want to call you on the phone, I like want to hear about everything. I want it to last hours, and I want it to have my undivided attention, and you don't always have hours of undivided attention to give. So, but I really admire people like my sister. She's really great at just like maintaining those friendships, and then once you call more consistently, then you don't have to have those long conversations every single time.
Fair.
And like know the background, you can check up on each other, and if it needs to go deep because someone needs something or because someone's pondering something, then you can create space for that, but you can continue that communication just more consistently.
Yeah, I think it's because I just can't. That's the thing, is like you have to.
No such thing as can't.
You're right. I think it's the fact that I don't have consistent conversations to get over like just the deep stuff that like, not that I need to get to, but that like it just comes up to the point where after like 5 calls, let's say, you're just having like, yo, what's good, everything good, like everything you have told me prior, how's that working out and whatnot. So that's something for sure I've acknowledged to myself that I want to improve, and just a quick message doesn't hurt, you know. And especially like if someone gets a message from me and they're like, oh dang, that person like cared, or like that person like exactly. I think that goes a long way in someone's life. At least for me, I would absolutely appreciate if someone, you know, like just send me a quick checkup message, or I do appreciate that when that does occur. Or it's kind of funny when I had my ankle surgery, and I don't know, this is they need to change the practices at the hospital, because they gave me my phone right after I like had come out of anesthesia, and like I was just waking up, and I'm making excuses as to what I was doing, but basically I posted a picture that made it seem like I had just been fucking hit by a car or something. So then like everyone like started reaching out like with concern, and I was like, oh shit, I'm gonna take this down. But also like I really appreciated everyone that did like reach out, you know. I didn't want that necessarily, but in a sense you could say that I did, because I posted it and whatnot. But it was really cool to get those messages and those responses. Like for me, it was one of those moments where I was happy of the friendships that I had and those people that did reach out. And the people didn't reach out wasn't like the end of the world either. I'm not that one type of person, because I feel like there are some people during, I guess, like those high school eras, right? And hopefully there's no adult people that are still living in this way where it's just like if someone doesn't respond or send something to you your way, like you get all upset, or like, oh my god, that person didn't say nothing back on my birthday, you know. It's kind of it's to the point of like I only try to control the things that I can control, and like I really can't control other people, and I live a way more free, liberating, uncluttered mind when I just kind of focus on my things and the things that I can control. So I guess that's kind of what I'm trying to get at it from that conversation. But back to Tony Robbins. Yeah. San Jose, Fiji, and then what other place? And then I want to talk more details regarding the actual events.
And then I went to Date with Destiny in Australia.
Okay. Yeah. So San Jose, Fiji, Australia, Unleash the Beast, Date with Destiny, and lifestyle and well-being, something along those lines.
Life and wealth mastery. Yeah.
Okay. So basically, did you start reading his books apart from like when Fat told you about the courses? Did you start reading into Tony Robinson?
I didn't read any of his books actually because I'm not a huge reader. I'd love to be more into reading, but I watched like a lot of his interventions, and so what that is like he'll just like call on someone and be like, what's going on in your life, and then he'll like talk to them for however long is necessary and like try to transform their life right there, and use like a lot of his techniques and that kind of stuff. So I was watching that, and I was also just like listening to a lot of his podcasts and a lot of his like speeches. He has a lot of content on YouTube and Spotify and other podcast platforms and whatnot. So initially it was more of like what he did that interested me, because I was thinking that might be something that I wanted to do, as far as like, no, I'm not trying to be Tony Robbins, like start my own company.
Yeah, that sounds dope. It sounds dope. That shit was going through my head as we were talking about this. I was like, man, that'd be so cool to hold like, get a hotel room, or not a hotel room, but one of those hotel conference rooms, and just invite a bunch of, or like send an invite to like the people that I follow or whatever, or they follow me, and just be like, hey, this is going to be free. I just want you to come through and let's just talk. Yeah. And let me stand on the stage and feel powerful for like an hour or two.
Yeah. No, it's really cool how he got his start. He had a really rough upbringing, and he was just like sick and tired of it. And so he would just like run and tell himself affirmations, and he would just get pumped up, and he like was transforming his life, and he wanted to transform other people's lives. So he would go on the radio, and he'd be like, come to my conference, I'll transform your life for free. And like all these psychologists would be like, you can't do that. And he just made a reputation for himself. Like he used to guarantee that he could get people to stop smoking. Shit. And what he would do is he'd bring them into his small little office, and this is back in the day when you could like smoke inside, and he would just like put a carton of cigarettes in front of them and be like, smoke the whole thing. And he would just make them smoke until they were sick and just disgusted and like never wanted another cigarette. And then he was like, I'm probably gonna get like secondhand smoke disease or whatever from this, so I gotta figure out different techniques. Just hotboxing his office type of shit. Yeah, but so then he was like, oh, I gotta try different techniques. And so then, but it was the observation of like, why does that work? Oh, it works because you're changing the meaning of cigarettes in someone's mind. They turned from this thing that provides relief, granted it's the stress that they cause, but nonetheless, like they provide relief, to this thing is disgusting and it's hurting my body. So that's where he came up with a lot of his change the meaning of something, and associate it with something different, focus on something different. So anyway, yeah, he got a lot of his experience. Like he completely is totally self-made. Like he just got a reputation, started a company, had enough people that wanted to come to his conferences that he could expand them, and yeah.
That's awesome. Yeah. I think it just goes to show that he really cared about the people, you know. Or I mean, even to this day, I would hope that he still has the same philosophy of wanting them to better their lives. Yeah. I think
that he understands people pretty well. It's pretty cool to watch his interventions, because sometimes there's things that go on that a lot of people like wouldn't understand. There's a reason why you can't like record the conferences, because he's not necessarily like the most politically correct person, in the sense that like sometimes what he has to say is like not the easiest thing to hear, and it could be like kind of triggering, you know, to tell a like a sexual abuse victim that in order to truly heal, they have to forgive their abuser and wish the best in their life, and recognize that that person probably had a pretty messed up past and is a person and was a child and has, you know, and to want what's good for them, because ultimately that's freeing for you, right? Like ultimately that could have occurred 20 years ago, and it doesn't take away from the act, but it's, why are you still allowing them to hold power or control over you? That's like pretty triggering for some people. And there was one lady who was just like having a really hard time with it, but at the end, like, it's so beautiful, because she like screamed and was like, you're wrong, and then she was trying to leave. And then he said, no, come talk. Like, you wanted to talk because you could have just left. And you could tell that she was really uncomfortable. And when he would say these things, she would, like, curl up in a ball. And he just, like, was, like, pulling these emotions out of her, almost like it was a string. And she was just, like, crumbling in front of your eyes.
It's kind of embarrassing in a sense, but hey, you know what? Power
hard.
to her.
You don't raise your hand if you don't want to put everything out there and like potentially be embarrassed. But at the end of it, if you rise to that challenge and you recognize that it's not your issues that are in the embarrassing thing, it's your unwillingness to face them when there is a solution and when you could feel better and when you could heal. If you're not willing to do that, that becomes the embarrassing thing. So over time, like, he kept working with her, and then she like really made a turn, and then it was so beautiful because throughout the rest of the conference, like, she never went anywhere without like 20 people around her, like trying to give her hugs and encouragement and love and support. And that's one of the things that I like the most, is that he's so driven towards like business and entrepreneurship and like making money and like in a lot of ways being a very masculine man, following a lot of those paths of nice house, you know, nice possessions, all that kind of stuff. And I think he attracts a lot of people who want to build their businesses and want to become successful. You know, he's worth like $500 million. And then you get there and it's like, oh, surprise, we're going to talk about love and relationships and forgiveness and kindness. And that's really the way that you become successful, is by balancing all of the. I
mean, in a way, though, that's how he became successful, was by doing exactly that. So in a sense, he's not going there to tweak his formula anymore. He knows what he's doing. Yeah. Like, if his formula was selling houses, he'd probably be giving lectures on how to sell houses. But his main business, I mean, I'm not saying he doesn't sell houses, but I'm sure he has someone that manages all that shit, right? But his wealth came from inspiring and attempting to change people's lives, which I think resonates kind of close to how I view things. I think when it comes to kind of my goals or what I want out of life, it's no longer revolving around like just money, material goods. It's more about just spreading a certain type of freedom and happiness that I have found through just life and just by just living and not by any material good. That now that's kind of what actually is a big passion of mine. And just because it's tough, even when I was asked the question even prior times, like, what is my passion? I would always like find it so difficult. I was like, oh, computer science, like, oh, I want to be a app developer or like do these things, right? And absolutely, it was just more these identities or molds that I was trying to fill. But in reality, the way I kind of found my passion, or what I am passionate about now, is the things that like I can speak about with great depth and great just energy. Like, I can go on for days regarding things that make me feel good, things that have made me better, things that have made me who I am today. And those type of topics are the topics that for sure make me the person that I am today. And I just want to get on top of a mountain and scream that to everybody and tell everybody that. Yeah, no, it's definitely super liberating. And I think that it's kind of a big realization. Like, when you're a kid, I feel like we're all a little bit more similar. Yeah, we're all different and whatnot, but we only have like such a certain sphere of experience, and there's a cap to what you can really know. And like for example, as a kid, if you really put a lot of effort into knowing things, like, you can easily know more about every single subject than all your peers, right? Like, absolutely. You could never do that now. And I kind of found that when I was a kid, it was all about like, how can I just be the best at every single thing, and how can I like know the most, and how can I, and not in an arrogant way, but just like in a prepared way, like I can be prepared for every situation. I can be admired in every single situation. And then as you get older, you realize like you can't know everything about you. Like, you don't know almost anything, so you have to like pick a set of things that you want to put your time into knowing. And so that's, I think, why when I was in college, like, learning about computer science was great, because it was just like another one of those things, and I could be good in my class, and I liked my other classmates and all that kind of stuff. And then I got to work, and I was like, I don't really want to spend 9 hours a day thinking about this. You know, I'd rather spend 9 hours a day thinking about something that interests me a little bit more. And that's when you start to realize that people are truly different, because there are people that could easily spend 10 hours a day talking about that stuff, and that is what they're passionate about, and they love it. And I used to think that like people were more similar, or that my opinions were like right, or I don't know, but now I've started to recognize that like, oh, I just love that everybody's so different. I love that someone can talk about computer science for 40 hours a week, you know, like, no problem, and they just lights them up. I'm so glad that you found this field. And
I think that's really what I want for everyone, is to like, unfortunately, just the way of the world, like we do have to work. I don't think that it's some system that's in place that's like forcing us to work. It's kind of like, well, somebody has to do the work. We want things. We want, whatever.
Comforts. Commodities.
Won't dive into the whole system talk, but we want things. We want comforts. We need things. So people kind of have to work. And I think a good goal for the world would not to be eliminating work, but to find a way for each person to do work that satisfies them and like fulfills them.
What do you think? Have you found that work for yourself?
No.
I was gonna say, like, what would you suggest? But I mean, if you're coming from an experience, which I am as well, right?
Yeah.
But I guess I would say, try to find something that excites you in life, and then try to make money with it. Which, to some things, right? Like, I think about my passion, right, and the things that I'm passionate about, and my passions are more just trying to, not, I guess you could say preach, but just show a different way of living for people, right? And that's not something that I think it's easy to make money off of, or I don't want that to be my driving factor for why I do that. I just want it to just be that's who I am. But I think if you can align what you're passionate about, what makes you excited in life, with what can make you money, if you can find the intersection of those 2 points, I think you're in just heaven and gold. And I think it's just a matter of lack of creativity for my part as to not being able to find that just yet. But at least I have a bearing of things that I do find excitement and passion in, which I think was the hardest thing to come to. Yeah. And I don't think this is going to be like, right. I mean, actually, I do hope that this is a passion of mine, but I also hope that I find other hobbies that also spark this interest, because I wouldn't necessarily want to just monetize off of my speaking or my talking. I'd much rather have that be supplementary to something else. And I guess overall, it's just sometimes when I talk to most people in life, like, it's very material centric, and there's nothing wrong with that. And I think sometimes it's just more of like the conditioning that now we have of like,
I think it's the conditioning, but I also think that it's a lot of people don't take the time to be like introspective enough to recognize that on the surface level they think that they want money or these material things, but really what they're after is
impressing somebody or something.
Yeah, it could be free. I think for a lot of people it's freedom. Like they want money because they want to be able to do what they want with their time, or it's material possessions because maybe like we have this hierarchy of needs, right? And not like Maslow's hierarchy of needs, but like we all have a need for love, contribution, like human connection.
I feel like that still fits Maslow's.
It does, but it's but this is not actually like a hierarchy. It's like there's 6 basic human needs that are not like food and water and all that kind of stuff. It's like love, giving, security, like variety or excitement. I don't know. I have to like look up.
Is it just a different? Is this a different?
Tony talks about it. It's not a hierarchy. It's like Tony talks about it in his
spectrum, I guess.
It's just 6 things that like, on some level, every single person needs. Mm-hmm. And if something meets 3 of those needs, that's when it becomes an obsession. So like if drugs or something meet your need for connection because you have friends in that area, and they meet your need for variety because they're exciting and it pumps you with dopamine and that kind of thing, then, and I wish I could remember all 6 of them, but if it meets that 3rd one, then that's where it becomes like an addiction, and you need to find something else that can replace those needs. And it's a hierarchy in the sense that we all, like look up Tony's like 6 human needs. In a sense, it's a hierarchy because we all prioritize them differently. Okay. So like if your biggest need on your list is security, and you want to feel safe, and you want to feel like you are in control and you know where things are going, then like you're going to live your life differently than if your highest priority is excitement and variety, right? So
I have them.
What are the other?
So number 1, or no order: certainty, significance, growth, variety, love and or connection, and contribution.
Right. And so
Okay.
some people, like, if your highest need is contribution, then you're probably going to go into something that involves like charity work or altruism. You're probably fairly altruistic. If your highest need is significance, like by a long shot, then you're potentially risk being draconian. Just kidding.
You forced that one. I'm not gonna count it.
Come on. No,
like that didn't count.
But the point more so is that people sometimes can have those needs out of order. So if they're like realistically, significance probably shouldn't be your number one need. Now, some people's personalities like have a tendency to go that, and it's not like it's bad, but you just need to be aware of that and balance it with the other things. And the point of that is that some people feel like money or whatever is going to meet that need of significance or love. They feel like, oh, if I have money, then I'll find like the significant other that I want or whatever it is. But really, it's not the money that they want. It's the significance or it's the love. And I think not a lot of people are introspective enough to analyze what those other things are that they're really, desiring.
How do we, if there was a magic wand, something that we could make people do, like zombies, that they would do to make them more introspective? Because I do 100% agree with what you just said, right? Where people and or myself will have a certain goal in mind of what I want, but if I peel back the onions as to what that thing brings me into my life, right, and if I peel it all back, I feel like I could find the answer and or the solution to it within me, in the sense of like, oh, if I need significance, I just need to treat myself better, have more value for myself, like not rely on other people for that significance, right? But what advice do you have? What tips do you have for someone to practice being more introspective in life?
I think it definitely depends on the personality type. For me, like, it's not always the easiest in lifestyle. Like, not everybody has, like, I guess what I'll say is, like, ultimately, if you could spend 3 hours a day asking yourself questions and thinking about the answers, like if you took that personality test, which is probably like 60 questions.
Everyone take the test. It's easy. It's 10 minutes. It's not going to take long.
10 minutes, not a big deal. But if you take the test from a different perspective, maybe not to get your results, but to like use them as question prompts to really sit there and like think about like, what's my answer? Like, there's probably a lot of questions that people just haven't asked themselves. They just haven't gotten to really know themselves. But not everybody has an hour or 3 hours. So the first thing is like, you could just spend 15 minutes a day asking yourself and pondering one question. And I find that if I do like a morning routine where I ask myself questions or I do affirmations or I think about what I'm grateful for, then I tend to think about those things throughout the rest of the day. Even subconsciously, maybe they come in and out. But that's been pretty transformative for me. But I also think it's not necessarily about being so introspective initially as much as it is like taking that step back and being like, and ask yourself questions like, do I like this? Do I like what I'm doing here? And if I don't, like, well, what would I rather be doing? And it's just continuing that series of questions with no expectation of what the answer is supposed to be, because it's just you and yourself. And then to add to that, I think if people take the time to figure out what they're grateful for and to get some perspective, like in our Women of My Tech the other day, they said that like we were talking about positivity and we were talking about like kind of how you stay positive and how you balance positive and negative emotions and all of that. And one of the things that came up was, now I'm going to forget what it was.
Something about positivity.
Yeah, no, it was perspective. And it was like in 1970, women didn't have the right to have their name on a credit card. And there was a couple other things that like they didn't have the right to do. And rather than looking at that like, oh my gosh, the world was such a horrible place, be like, dang, just by existing right now where I live in this world, I'm already like on a pretty good foot. And I have all these things to be grateful for. And all these things that you don't have to do anything for. The fact that you enjoy sitting in the sun and just feeling that. The fact that we enjoy eating, taking a shit, like all of those things are just things that life gives you that are joyful that you have to do nothing for. So taking that step to be grateful, and then really paying attention to your self-talk. Because I think a lot of people, even the people that I've found that appear to be like the most confident and the most sure, are really insecure, and their self-talk is probably pretty negative. And be really careful about the I am statements. And I really do believe that the universe, that's a common phrase these days, but the universe, but more so like the connection between your body and your mind validates those I am statements. Like, I am stupid. Immediately your body's like, okay, I guess we're stupid. Versus you could say I am smart, but then really think about what's your definition of smart. Because if your definition of smart is that other people have to see me as smart, then you're just kind of lying to yourself. But then maybe you need to change it to I am capable. Or maybe you just need to change it to I'm enough as I am. I'm complete. And then it takes a lot of that pressure off of when people go to be introspected, all of those expectations of what their life should look like, of the ways that they're failing, that I think are so many negative emotions that when people go to be introspective, they just want to run from it because they don't really like themselves. And the reason they don't like themselves is because they haven't taken the time to know themselves, and they're probably telling themselves horrible things about themselves. And I don't think that that's necessarily the world to blame, because people are just living. If I look at somebody else, like on social media or something, and I feel jealous, or I compare myself and I feel like my life should look like that way, it's not the person's fault who created social media or posted that. That's completely on me. And that doesn't take away from the fact that we have to pay attention to these trends, and that social media and that kind of stuff, they are affecting people, but it's that locus of control, right? It's like, do you have that external locus of control where my life is completely in control of other people and everybody else's fault for where I'm at in my life? Or is it internal? Like, I'm in control of my decisions in my life and who I am. And I think once you get that locus of control back to being internal, then you feel like you're capable of doing something about it. And I think part of the reason people, again, aren't introspective is because they don't really feel like they can do anything about it. And that probably, again, leads to the fact that they tell themselves that they can't.
Yeah, I think I got 3 core topics that are easy take home, you can use and start practicing whenever, right? One of them is comparing yourself to other people. I think that's when you really start to get those images of like, well, I'm not good enough. Look at that person's doing all these things. You start really talking negative to yourself and or validating things that aren't necessarily true. Which I don't think benefits you in any sense. Another thing, and I think the core of trying to be or being introspective is being truthful, and that is not to others but to yourself. And by being truthful to yourself, you will be truthful to everyone around you. I think sometimes people stick too close to their ego and certain ways of like what they think they should be like and whatnot, which then at that point, as soon as you get to that realization that you have an ego or an identity to upkeep, as soon as someone questions that identity, you tell yourself lies, or you tell them lies and you tell yourself lies, right? Where you're like, well, that's not the only reason I'm like this is because XYZ and like everything and this and this and this, or like you start making exceptions for some of your issues, right? And again, you start blaming the outside world instead of taking responsibility into your hands. And I think that's one thing that I've noticed in people, even above like older than me and younger than me, where ownership is not something that people are strong in. I think that's something that people almost like want to brush away because they don't want that negative smear on their name. And I understand that, but I think as soon as we get rid of that ego and smearing whatever ego or whatever identity you're trying to uphold, and when someone asks you a question or when you ask yourself a question and you actually answer it truthfully, I think that's when you get real true value out of being introspective. Because you could say you're introspective and lie to yourself about asking questions like, oh yeah, do I think I make friends easily, right? You can be like, oh, absolutely I do. I make friends. I have tons of friends. And you just start naming people who to them you might be an acquaintance to, right? So I think being truthful is key. Don't compare yourself to others. And I had another one, which was you mentioned it at the very end, which was not blaming the world for your issues. I think there's something so powerful behind that. by all means, the world is really fucked up. There's so many fucked up things in the world. There's also equally a lot of beautiful things in the world. As much as we want to change things and wish things were different, unfortunately, the way things are and the capacities that we as humans have and or carry, we can't carry all that burden on our chest and on our shoulders, right? We have to learn that what we can control is a really small piece of this ginormous puzzle we're all a part of, right? And by controlling yourself and giving yourself the leniency and loving yourself, you empower and or you help the world as a whole, because you are a part of the whole world, right? Yeah. And that love and compassion is also very contagious. And by no means should you not like have opinions about the outside world, but I think it gets very toxic when you try to change the whole world to fit your molds or make it perfect for you. And I think as soon as you figure out that you have to be and or equip yourself with the tools and shields and defense mechanisms that the outside world doesn't have an effect on you, then that's when a truly powerful moment happens in your life.
And balancing that without getting bitter, because I think a lot of people hit that point and they just like, fuck it, the world is a horrible place, and so the world can't control me, I'm my own self. But it's kind of like you're just kind of getting bitter. But I think a good analogy for a lot of ways of what you're saying is it's like if you're not happy with your weight or something like that.
Okay.
You feel like the solution would be for all grocery stores to get rid of chips and candy, and that should just be eliminated from the world. And once the world does that, then I'll be fit. And there is some truth to that, right? Because if all stores only sold super healthy things and like didn't sell any candy or junk food or all that crap, then like maybe you would. But the reality is, and I think part of the reason why people don't complain like that is because they recognize, I can't control all of that. But for some reason, that concept is people are good at grasping. Like, I have to take control of this. I have to watch what I eat. I have to watch how much I exercise. But I think that same example can get cast onto what you do with your job and what you do with school. And if you have that opinion that like, I'm this way because school screwed me over, or because society screwed me over, or whatever it is, it's like, yes, there's a lot of super messed up things in the past, and society's not perfect, and there's a lot of super messed up things, but we are also sitting in one of the greatest time period in human history. And it's a beautiful thing that humans have continued to progress and figure things out. And at least in this country, it feels like there's a lot of division, but I think that there's a lot of division because there's space to heal the past. And it doesn't mean that there's not stuff that's going on now, but it's just saying that compared to every other time period in the world, we live at one of the greatest time periods to do something about your life and it not to be society's fault. And if you can think about it, similar to that food issue, where if you sit around and wait for all grocery stores to eliminate sugar and junk food, then you're never going to change. If you sit around and wait for society to tell you that you don't have to go to college and that's not the best path for your life, like, you may never figure out what you want to do with your life. Because the thing is that college is a great path for some people and not a great path for another person. And the difference is between someone that gets stuck in whatever path is the person that just says, I don't really care what people are telling me what to do. I need to take this step on my own and figure out what's best for me. And that may not be easy. You might walk down the aisles and see the junk food every single time you check out at a grocery store. You can't avoid it. But it's in your control. And like you're saying, like, you can only focus on the things that you can control. And that doesn't mean that there's not other messed up things, and it doesn't mean that we shouldn't continue to make effort to fix those things. It just means that in the midst of fixing the world, you have to fix yourself. And it's a pretty crazy realization to think that if every single person in the world really put effort on fixing themselves and being the best person that they could be, then a lot of the world's problems would be fixed.
Absolutely. And I think there's nothing wrong with saying, like, how about we fix ourselves and have the world also be fixed? And I think that sometimes is the middle ground when it comes to people that I have conversations with, where it's kind of the opposite philosophy of like, well, there's so much going on in this world. XYZ is so fucked and we need to change them and or that thing. And I think the middle ground is, how about we do both? How about we try to change those outside environmental things and also try to help ourselves be more impenetrable to those outside factors, right? So for me, I definitely 100% agree with that. And one thing that also like sparked an idea that I've always had in my head is the fact that everyone in a sense is passionate about some adversity in life. Like for me, my passion and or like if I was to volunteer somewhere or things that I want to give back in is in education, and particularly lower socioeconomic education and kind of the programs there, because for me school basically was the outlet for me to really have a certain amount of freedom that I have now, and because of school I am where I am. And of course all this, there are a lot of other things, right? But I 100% believe that everyone is passionate about a certain small little microcosm, a little world, and as long as everyone fixes themselves and then focuses on their little world instead of having everybody's problem be your own problem. And at one point you have so many decisions as to where should I provide aid. Should I provide aid to this nation? Should I provide aid to this community? Try to help these people out, right? Help the people that you kind of at that point have the most passion and or ability to help, right? And if you can't, by all means, like donate and help wherever you can. But I think where it becomes powerful is if you help yourself and then you help your microcosm, your world, the things that affect you or the things that drive you in the world. I think that's when we can really make actual progress in things, right? Because I know a lot of people, like for me, I guess something that not that I don't care about, but I don't have too much experiences in maybe someone with like mental disabilities, right? And I almost know 100% there's people out there that have experience in that, have either experienced it themselves or in their family that have experience with mental disabilities, and those people are the best to kind of go and facilitate and create those change, right? And the fact that we have so many of us good people that at times we have so many issues that we're looking on the board that we're like, oh, which one should I attack? Oh my God, there's so much going on that we just got to think about, like, okay, which one can I and or has something of immediate effect to me, right? And I have the most knowledge behind under context. Because I feel like nowadays we're just having so many problems that we're just forgetting about even taking care of ourselves, because we kind of feel bad about someone else who isn't where we're at, which isn't a bad thing to be. I think that's just part of being empathetic or sympathetic, whichever the two is, right? And at the end of the day, we have to remember that we have to put ourselves first before anything. I think
number one before number two.
Number one. Shout out Henry and his quotes and his aphorisms, his Proverbs. Not Proverbs. Is that Proverbs?
Proverbs are just
I thought that's not a proverb, right? That's a.
I think of Proverbs as probabilities. I think of Proverbs as like, hey, you do this is most likely going to happen to you. You do this is most likely to happen. So it's like the early bird gets the worm, and it's kind of like that's a proverb in the sense of if you wake up early, you're most likely to like be more successful and get to the worm first. But
the more you know,
you might not get the worm. So it's probability.
I like that mnemonic memory mechanism. Is that what you would call that? Yeah. That sounds smart, right?
Although mnemonic seems like, I don't know.
I want to say mnemonic is. I have to look that up now. I feel like now everyone is gonna learn, and we're gonna see what mnemonic. If I can even spell it, that's like. All right, this is how you say it. Mnemonic. A device such as a pattern of letters, ideas, or associations that assist in remembering something. So, yeah.
Yeah, perfect.
Yeah.
Mnemonic.
I heard that somewhere, so that's why I used it.
Probably heard it
I feel like that's how, that's how language is, right? You hear something that someone says, and you slightly understand the context, and then you start using it in your vocabulary, in your dictionary. Words are something that I think I've talked about it before in the podcast that I had with Oscar Lorandi, where I was talking about words and how amazed and interested I am in words and their meanings behind it and why people use certain words that they use, right? So for sure, anytime I don't know a word or something, I just Google it, which is something that one of my friends, even though it's obvious, right? It's like, oh, bro, come on, you didn't know that?
Yeah.
But like back in college, one of my friends was like, kind of had this revelation, but like a very simple but also crazy one, right? Where, and his name is Milo Coral. And he basically was like, dude, you could just Google anything, right? Like, isn't that crazy? Like, you could just ask a question or ask anything, and it'll like. So like now, and what I'm speaking in his voice, or this is what he was saying, and he was like, now I just Google anything. Like anything I have questions with, I Google. Yeah. I have to know the answer to, right? And sometimes I feel like people. Like, that literally took me, I think, like 10 seconds to do. Like,
and the answer is there.
Answer's there. You learn something new, and you get to use it later or whatnot, right? You have something else to put in your toolkit. So, absolutely, shout out Milo for showing me the powers of Google, even though they were apparent. It's
interesting, though, right? Like, sometimes it's obvious once you hear it. You're like, oh, yeah. But for whatever reason, you just hadn't thought of it.
Also, side comment, I'm finally understanding what the meaning of like a dry wine means, especially when like I'm talking a lot.
Yeah.
This isn't even the driest thing. This is like straight up a medium wine, which I don't know, it's between sweet and dry. But my like throat is like so dry from drinking it. I'm curious, or I'm very certain that's why they name like dry wine because it just fucking makes your throat dry.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I've never been too much of a wine person or into wines, but I'll be honest with you. I've been watching a lot of like travel, food, cooking videos, and a couple like people that just go straight into wine and talking about wine and their love for wine that made me want to like, okay, what's going on here? Like, there's a world.
I'm wondering
I'm
if
not there.
This is a trait that you have, but like I'm super susceptible to when someone likes something. So like I grew up my whole life like really not liking candy or chocolate. Like for the most part. I feel very blessed, but it is just not my thing. Like, and any kids.
I wouldn't say blessed. I would say cursed. Chocolate is amazing.
But here's the difference: is that I like good chocolate because my best friend in high school like had the biggest sweet tooth, but she would remedy it by buying like expensive. She was a
connoisseur of sweets.
Yeah, that she could like take little bites of, and the way that she made it look, I started liking good chocolate. So I like good chocolate, but like for me to like a sweets, it has to be so well made, not very sweet. Like anyway, but it's more of that susceptibility to like when somebody likes something, then I'm like, oh, I kind of like it. And that happened with wine because my sister, she right after she graduated high school, she took 3 years off to like travel around the world. She lived in Ireland for a few years. She lived in Peru in the middle of the jungle, which was a crazy experience.
That sounds so
like
awesome.
Yeah. It was really crazy. She had never spoke Spanish before, and
that's called jumping off the edge.
And there was 1 week that they went into the jungle. Like, so they're in the jungle, but it's in like the city. I wish I could remember the city name. And they went like deeper, like trekked for like 2 days into this tiny little village, deep into the jungle where nobody speaks any English at all. And they sent her with this little 12-year-old. To be like her translator. But when they got there, the little 12-year-old was like, just to let you know, like, I'm not going to be speaking English in this place. Because naturally, this 12-year-old was like, I don't want to be that weird person who's like speaking English to like the white girl, so I'm just not going to speak. So then she was there for a week, like, no English, like, or anything like that.
She was a dictionary, a Spanish dictionary?
No, she didn't have anything. And that's why she speaks Spanish like pretty well now.
That's your older sister? Younger sister. Margaret? Got it. The adventure.
So she spent like a good amount of time in Ireland, and the drinking age is a little lower in Ireland.
16?
She was 18.
So 18. Let's say 18.
But I'm not sure what the drinking age is. It might be 16.
Those Irish.
Yeah.
I think it's in the baby bottle.
I went to an Irish wedding one time. It was dope. But she learned like kind of how to drink from a very like craftsman, like good wine, good beer perspective. And then she like came back home, and she'd get so pissed because she'd like buy a nice bottle of wine, and like without fail I'd be like, and she'd be like, don't waste it. If you don't like it, then don't drink it. And I'm like, no, I like it. And so over time, I did develop a like for it, and yeah, now it's definitely an acquired taste, but I like it now.
I feel like that's how most acquired tastes become. Like coffee and soda water for me were like, just like straight up.
Yeah.
But I could drink both of them straight up like black now. I prefer coffee with cream, but I can absolutely do coffee straight up. Soda water I can do as well. And then wine as well. I feel like I've been introduced by various people to wine to now really kind of have a certain palate for it, you know. Previously I was very not about it. I was like, oh god, this is gross. But that's how I felt about beer too. I feel like in college I was like in high school I was drinking like hard liquors. It was like basically the fanciest of bottles you could think of, because it was all about status. And if you showed up to a party with a like bottle of Grey Goose, hell no. Hell, I downgraded going to college. I was living the high life in high school to the point where in college it was like beer parties and kegs, and I was like, I'm broke. I gotta succumb. I'm gonna drink some beer, and then I got used to it. Most of my friends drank beer, and then now I won't say I love it, but I like a glass of beer.
Yeah, I didn't drink until my junior year of college, so I think it was
nerd.
About 21.
Freaking nerd. Ever? Like not even in high school? So in high school,
I drank 3 times. I think it was my 16th birthday. Was the first time I ever drank. And I like no exposure to alcohol. Had no clue what alcohol did. Like nobody in my family drinks. I showed up to my 16th birthday. They handed me like a 5th of tequila that was probably like a quarter full, and
a 5th of tequila of like a bottle.
Yeah, like a bottle, and it was like, you know, probably like that full or something.
Got it.
Like, sweet, this is what you do. Chugged it.
Didn't feel nothing?
No, I chugged it, and then in my mind, I woke up the next morning and I was like, God, geez, guys, sorry I fell asleep so early. That was like, I thought the party lasted 30 minutes. Apparently, I was the life of the party. Yeah.
Your first blackout.
my only blackout, and I think that I think that was why is. Like, then of course, like, there's times that are pretty spotty and I don't remember, like, a lot of details. But I think that experience was very fundamental in, like, never doing that again. And then there was one time, we have like a...
That's my alarm system.
I think we have, like, a yearly fair every year. So one time was that. And then I think there was one other time I played, like, King's Cup or something like that. But anyway... I just made that decision for my reasons when I went into college, and I think it was a great decision. Like, I had a blast my first 2 years of college, like going to every single party, being the designated driver, had a super fun time with all my friends, never woke up hungover, never missed a weekend, like, super great. But once you get into it, it's hard to go back. But when I was... when I first started drinking, I think people had like a more refined taste, and I was hanging out with my sister a lot, and she like really liked IPAs and dark beers and like
Margaret.
Was really not about,
she is a sophisticated beer. Woman.
She's very sophisticated.
This is what I'm getting.
That would be like the biggest compliment ever. But so I think that's probably like kind of where that taste developed, because I freaking love IPAs. Yeah. But you mentioned something earlier that I kind of wanted to go back to, and that was like the value of prioritizing taking care of yourself and your physical health, and
physical, mental, and spiritual. I feel like if I was gonna put an asterisk and correct myself in the past, that's what I would put.
Yes. Particularly in the sense that it's amazing how much your emotions, your mental, your spiritual health has like such a big effect on your physical health. And I was in that call earlier today, and that was like a huge source of our conversation, because my arm is like super messed up. My veins are being pinched.
Just what is the name of the syndrome?
Thoracic outlet syndrome.
Okay.
Yeah. So my collarbone and my top rib are... There's a like veins, arteries, and nerves that pass through there. They're pinching, and they're at this point pinching veins and nerves.
Got it.
And so I was talking with my coach, and she was talking all about observing the things that I've talked about over the last little while, which are very related to what we're talking about with like, what do I want to do in life? Like, where are my passions? Like, this is not it. Like, I don't love my job. I don't love certain aspects. And I've done really well, I think, at starting to be introspective and diving into asking those questions and not just going with the flow and taking what's there. But kind of a theme in a lot of those areas is feeling stuck or pinched and feeling like I'm not fully living life. I'm not living life to the fullest. I'm not doing these things that I want to do and that I desire to do, and I want to make these changes. And she's like, this might be kind of out there, but after all these things that I've listened to, I'm not surprised that the issue that you're dealing with is pinching, and the pinching of your life force, your blood, the thing that gives and pumps life, into your whole body. So
that's
she's
wild.
like, do you think that could be a manifestation of how you feel about life? And I'm like, yeah, I mean, I can't deny that. That's probably fairly fair.
In the world of possibilities, I can't say no.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. I do kind of feel that way about life. And she mentioned someone called, I think, Gobra Mate.
Yerba mate?
No, not the tea. No, like I think it was Gobra Mate, and he wrote a book that's called When Your Body Says No, and he particularly believes that all physical ailments come from some sort of emotional, mental, or spiritual stress that is in your life, and they manifest as physical ailments that and essentially your body is saying, like, make a change. No, we can't keep up with this. Like,
yeah.
And so anyway, I thought that was like a pretty interesting concept. I feel like that's something that you relate with, but also definitely not super mainstream. Like, you can't just go around being like telling your doctor, like, I'm pretty sure this is occurring because I'm feeling very pinched in my life. But I think it's super powerful, and I have experienced throughout my life that when you're in a really positive place, mentally, physically, or mentally, emotionally, and physically, and when you're in a place where sickness isn't necessarily convenient, and you say, like, no, I'm not going to get sick, and I don't want to get sick, and my life is going, and not to the point where you're so busy that you're neglecting yourself, but when you're really at that place where you're valuing yourself, and you're busy doing the things that you're passionate about, and you're in a happy place, it's probably not the place that you get super sick in. And in a lot of ways, I think that I have run myself dry, and the fact that this is, like, most likely going to result in surgery, and the fact that when I hear that, I'm like, oh my gosh, that's a break, right? It's like 6 weeks off or 2 weeks off in life to just do whatever is kind of like, that probably means that you haven't been living your life, giving yourself the breaks and the rest and acknowledging those things as much as you want, and your body's trying to give that to you. And it doesn't mean that if I just change my mindset, it's just going to be healed all of a sudden. But I do think it's worth paying attention to. So
I think it goes back to the whole thing of, like, what you can't control, and by all means, you can't control your environment. You can't stop that from happening, but you can absolutely make the effort to make yourself better. And that, to me, is kind of, in a sense, I won't say a philosophy of mine, because it's crazy. I was watching some philosophical videos prior to you coming today, and there was, like, a video called The Backwards Law, and by in the sense of, like, the more I think about myself as, like, needing self-improvement and or wanting to make myself better, or wanting to make myself happier, or wanting to make myself slimmer, fill in the blank, right? You're acknowledging that you're not in a place you want to be, you're not enough, which I think is the cause of the backwards law, right? Like, if you're like, oh, I want to be rich, I want to have money, you're acknowledging that you're broken, that you're like, don't have the money for it. And also, I'm gonna go shut the window just because it's louder than I thought.
the sprinklers.
My mom is watering, which I can't stop her from doing. But yeah, I think when it comes to just, if you could have any goals in life right now, like anybody, I would just prioritize yourself at the top of those lists. Like, make sure that you are the one that you are taking time out of your day to take care of yourself, which is going to the gym, stretching, whether in diets, right, doing yoga, whether it's in dieting, giving yourself better foods, better supplements, vitamins, things that...
And as an asterisk to all of that, it's not all of that, right? Like, eventually it might be, but maybe it's just one of those things. And I think that's something that gets people tripped up, is that they're like, all right, I'm going to change my life. I'm going to change the way I eat. I'm going to work out every single day. I'm going to read all these books. you're gonna get over.
Yeah.
Just do one of those things. But anyway.
No, that's really important to mention. I was talking to someone earlier today, and that's kind of how I was giving an example of how you implement good habits in your life, right? Like if you want to start eating healthier and you have a busy job, for one Monday out of your week, make yourself lunch. And that's it. Just one day out of the week, make yourself lunch and start that. Do that for X amount of weeks. And then once you feel comfortable with that, make lunch Monday and Friday, Do a small incremental thing, because I think that's where a lot of people end up failing, is when they prescribe themselves a list of all these really demanding of willpower and discipline all at once. Like, okay, starting Monday, I'm going to start working out, I'm going to journal, I'm going to meditate, I'm going to do yoga, I'm going to work out, and I'm going to fast all at the same time. And I've never done these before. Let's go. That just
Not to mention research and inform yourself.
Absolutely. And it's just all so beyond reality that sometimes when we're making goals for ourselves, they're not realistic. So that's, I guess, as you were saying, when you are setting up goals for yourself, that's kind of what you want to do, is make them realistic.
Yeah. And full circle to that, go back to like analyzing and being introspective about like what those needs are. Because if your need for losing weight is because you want to be seen differently in someone else's eyes, or like because significance is too high on your list, or if your goal for whatever you're doing is not because it makes my life better, or it can involve other people as much as like, I really want to play with my kids and I can't because I get too exhausted. Like that's a good motivation to have to like do something. But really taking the point is that really taking that step back and realizing, why do I want this? Because maybe you don't. Maybe you actually don't really need to like lose weight. Maybe you just want more energy, and your goal should be to like eat healthy and like drink some water. Like maybe really all you need is like some water or whatever. But the point is that if you can take that step back and not just make a list of everything that that you could do that could improve your life, but maybe initially make that whole list. Like, yeah, I'm gonna journal, meditate, yoga, do all this kind of stuff. But then draw a little dash and be like, why? And maybe that's that next step. And then all of those things that are for other people, maybe besides like your kids or like enjoying life more. But really the reason that you want to do that with your kids is because you want a closer relationship with your kids. It's still kind of about you. And it's this weird juxtaposition where we don't want to give into that ego, we don't want to be arrogant, but we still need to figure out how to prioritize ourselves, and that can involve other people. But again, getting back to that, why do I want to implement this? And for me, in a lot of ways, that's been beneficial, because sometimes I'm doing things that I think I need to do because it would make my life better, but ultimately it's just taking time, and I don't even really want to do that, or I don't really even care about the outcome. So another great example is like working out. If your goal of working out is to just look fit because you're trying to attract somebody, well, that's like at the end of your workout goal, potentially. Maybe really what you want is like a little bit more energy throughout the day. Really what you want is, if a sports game arises, like you feel confident jumping into it and you feel capable. Or if you guys ask, hey, we're doing a softball league at work, you want to join? And it's not like, oh shoot, that's in 2 weeks and I can't get around the bases, It's kind of like a preemptive prep. Then if you can align that motivation, then I think that you're going to set yourself up for more success in accomplishing it than especially if it's something I want everyone to see me in a certain way, because it goes back to, you can't control all of those things. And so then you're never actually going to accomplish that goal. You could lose all the weight in the world. You could be the fittest person in the world. You can't make everybody in the world like you. So then it doesn't matter how much work you do, you're never going to accomplish your ultimate goal.
Yeah, I think you really opened up my eyes to something that I've always been very naive of and never acknowledging of, is understanding why people want to improve themselves, if they even do want to in the first place. Like, I always am in a very, I guess, almost egotistical way. Like, I'm a prescriber of things. Like, oh, go do these things. Do this, and this, and I guarantee your life will be better, right?
And it will.
But I don't think I'm like actually like listening to the person and what their actually wants are in life, right? If their wants are, as the example you were using, having more energy, right? Maybe working out isn't necessarily like the one key solution to it, but I think nutrition absolutely is, right?
Water.
And maybe after we accomplish that, when we're like, hey, do you want to proceed and go further from that? But I'm always too much of a prescriber, or I almost ignore listening to that person and their actual wants, and I'm almost giving them an answer that they didn't even want or care to hear. So I think that's very, in a sense, eye-opening to me, that I never thought about that perspective until you brought that up. So I will continue or try to live in that way of understanding why people want to make themselves better, or like what is their driving factor. Because there's people that are completely content with their body type. They are happy the way they are, and truly happy, right? And there's nothing I can really do or say about that. So it's one of those things, like if you want more energy, you could try different things, or if you want happiness or whatever it may be, right? I think I have to more be selective as to what they're actually wanting.
So a good example is my mom always has been like pretty heavy throughout her life, and my whole life she's always been on this like weight loss journey. She's like doing these exercise programs and these diets and all this kind of stuff, and she's like gone up and down, but pretty much stayed the same until COVID happened. And then she was hearing about how if you're overweight, then you had a higher chance of being affected by COVID.
Mm-hmm.
And it really made her take that step back and be like, you know, I'm probably like, it's a very serious issue, but like realistically, you know, she's like 55, like she's not a super high susceptibility to it. But it was that realization that like being at her size was a detriment to her health, and her kids are now starting to have kids and starting to get married, and she wants to be there for all of that. And so she really put her mind to like eating right and being a little bit healthier, and it's really started to pay off. But that is a big difference in like once she finally switched that motivation to like, and this is where we do need people. You know, we've talked a lot about like, oh, it's all about me, but we don't live in a world by ourselves. We live in a world with all these people. We're very motivated by all these people, and there is a certain level to which that is valuable, and that's kind of what she needed. You know, she's like, for me, I want to be here for my kids, but for my kids, I also want to be here for them. And that was kind of the mindset that she needed to, and she doesn't need to lose weight for looks, right? Like, she's happily married. She's had all of her kids. Like, she doesn't care what people think. She's not on stage. Like, you know, there's all these things where it's like, wait a second. Why am I trying to meet some body standard that's like defined when it won't actually add anything to my life? And that's, I think, why she continually kind of fell off. But what will add to her life is extending her life by making sure that she's healthy and making sure that she's there. And that was really the mindset that she needed to truly put in the work to make those changes.
Yeah, I think it does at times take some encouraging, or whether it's a person or an outside force, to open your eyes a bit and to be kind of honest with yourself. There's times where you might, I don't know, because I kind of, it's just, you never know what's going inside someone's head. If someone's telling the truth about themselves or not, that's not for me to know or to care for, right? But I just want the best for those that are around me, in a sense. So I would hope that, and or from my experiences, I do know that I feel a lot better when I'm in the position and or the weight I'm at right now compared to, I've never actually really been overweight or like in a heavier set sense. So like I don't have experience in that. So I can't even say it's a bad thing. For all I know, it's a great thing, right? And it's
it's really a personal thing. And I think that's what we have to get back to, is that like there's this one like I like to call him my influencer. I actually haven't heard that phrase before, but I heard
that phrase so many times.
From me, I think.
No, I've heard that phrase.
Or
it's on people's profiles.
No, but they're not, I'm not saying like someone is an influencer. I'm saying like, oh, one of my influencers, like using it in that tense.
Or as in like you actually been influenced.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
Like versus like, oh, someone might follow on Instagram. It's like one of my influencers, someone that I see every day. She's just naturally like a beautifully heavy set woman. And like she's very healthy. She has energy. She like works out, but her just natural body type is heavy. And curvy, and like, and she has just been on this journey, and like right now she is just like so confident, and she likes her body, and she wears what she wants, and like it's been so empowering to see that and to recognize, and like the amount of women that comment on her stuff and post on her stuff and be like, you have helped me feel confident in myself. And like, and that's why I think it's so important to get back to those what do you ultimately want?
Mm-hmm.
Do you want confidence? Because you can create confidence right now. Like, you don't have to do anything to get confident. That actually is potentially completely independent of like what
physical
you look like
attributes,
or what you're doing or anything like that. And I think that's a journey that I had to go on. Was I specifically chose a difficult degree because I thought in order to have confidence and in order to present myself in a good way, when someone asked what I did, I had to say something hard. I, kind of like sadly now I realize I didn't value computer science as much as I valued psychology, even though I would have loved to go into psychology. I didn't want to tell people that because I, for some reason, thought, and this is a way that society can't influence you, but my own opinion about myself is stronger than what society's opinion is. And so recognizing that like, oh, my confidence doesn't have to come in my degree or my body or whatever it is. It comes from me deciding that I like myself. My talk towards myself is, I am complete. I'm enough exactly as I am. And once you switch that self-talk, then it's like, okay, well, if I was only after confidence, like I can do that right now. I don't have to do all this hard stuff. And then it's like, okay, now I want to like, maybe it would feel really empowering to, like, for me, one of the things about, like, one of the reasons I want to wake up early and I want to go working out or something like that is because I want to prove to myself that I can do hard things that I don't really want to do. I want to prove that I'm in control of my own willpower and my own discipline and all that kind of stuff. And if that's my goal, then when I wake up, I don't have to like go out and do the most insane workout ever. Otherwise, I'm not going to see progress. I just have to get up and go do something. And then I accomplish my goal. And once I start doing that, then I can add goals onto that. But again, if you just make that whole list of everything that you want and that you think that you should be doing, like, you're setting yourself up for failure because you're going to drop off. And this is another lesson I learned at the Tony Robbins conference is he has 9 principles. I think it's probably better to start with 1 or 3. But make a list of 1 or 3 or 9 things that you want to do every day and every week. And that is, I want to wake up at this time, or I want to drink this amount of water. And just start with those things. Like, and one thing I've started to do is in the morning, I'll sit down and I'll journal what would make today great. And rather than some arbitrary, who knows where the definition of what a great day would be, when I go to bed, I'm like, oh, this day was a failure because this or this or this didn't happen. Versus like, today would be great if I go on a 15-minute walk or I do a 30-minute exercise. Regardless of anything else that happens in the day, today would be great if I do this one thing. And then at the end of the day, if you do that one thing, your day was great. And you could have failed at whatever number of things that it could have been, but it's like, who defines that? And again, it's that, am I defining it? Am I taking control of my own life, or am I letting other people define that for me? And the more that we can break away from these being questions that you have to answer now or that you have to live by now, and more just being, I haven't really taken the time to think about that question. I'm gonna think about that question.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe I do it. Maybe I don't. Do I want this to be a definition for my day to be great? Maybe I do. Maybe I don't. But at the end of the day, we really all die, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so many people, I think that's like a morbid perspective, but it's like ultimately, it's refreshing. Like, who really cares? That's why I love the book of Ecclesiastes in the Bible. It's kind of a weird book because the whole beginning starts off as like, what's the point of life? Everything is hevel. Hevel is a Hebrew word that translates in a lot of the Bible translations to meaningless, but it doesn't actually mean meaningless. It means smoke. Now, it'd be hard to write like a book saying everything is smoke, because like, what's the meaning? But Hebrew is like such a beautiful visual language, and a better translation is smoke, because it's like, it looks like it's tangible and visible and like it takes shape, but I just can't grab it. Life looks like it has these goals. It looks like it should take this shape, but I can't really quite grasp it. And so the whole beginning of the book is like, what's the point? Everybody dies. The day comes, the day goes. I could do nothing, or I could do something. It doesn't really matter. Like, ultimately, nobody really cares. Like, I could die tomorrow. Like, it just seems kind of depressing. But then it translates into the ultimate point being like, that's actually liberating. Because, yeah, realistically, once you die, like, we don't really know what happens, but most likely, I think most theories lead to, like, you're not going to really care what you did. And take that step back and recognize that, so what am I going to do about this? I'm just going to enjoy a good conversation with a friend. I'm just going to enjoy the sun on my face. I'm just going to enjoy myself. I'm going to like my personality. I'm going to say good things about myself. I'm going to just take this day as a blessing. And I think that sometimes people get so fearful that they're going to be unmotivated, or they're not going to do something about that change, because there's a very similar parallel to, what's the point of life? I don't care. I'm just going to do drugs and drink my life away. And I think that some people recognize that that's a similar feeling and they don't want to go there. But it's a different feeling, because it's a difference between, what's the point of my life? I'm bored and I don't care and this adds value, versus today is valuable and this conversation is valuable because I decide that it's going to be. And it just takes like a big amount of pressure off. And also recognizing that, like, another lesson that I've had to really learn is that every single person is on their own journey and their own path through life, and that's going to look different. So, you know, I think a good example is, I used to look back to people that, like, found their soulmates in college and be like, and they would get married and then they did that whole process, and I'm like, you know, why wasn't it that easy for me? Like, there's this whole journey of heartache and frustration and da-da-da-da-da, and then it's like, that's my journey, and I can come from and if you want to look for a positive, then it's like, well, I can speak to situations very differently because of the experiences that I've had, and maybe that's part of my purpose and my journey here. But ultimately, I don't need to have those answers, because I know that A, I'm not in control of what my journey is, and B, we all want to be unique, and your path through life and who you are is unique. And so again, it's like, if your goal, or if you look back to like what you ultimately want, if that is uniqueness, then like you already achieved that. And I think that's the value, again, full circle, of realizing and taking the time to think, what is my ultimate goal in doing this? Because maybe you actually already accomplished it. Maybe you really don't need to do this thing. And it's just super liberating. I think that the beautiful thing about this whole self-improvement journey, about this whole coming to peace with who you are and where you are, is freedom. And I think ultimately a ton of people are seeking freedom. And they're seeking freedom through money, through work, through relationships, or whatever it is, without recognizing that if they took that step back and realized that I just want some freedom, I can give that to myself right now. Absolutely. And that doesn't mean that you're going to feel it right now, or that you're going to feel it all the time. But taking that step back and realizing that means that you're going to be more in tune to when you don't feel that way. And then don't immediately try to analyze that emotion. Like, get out of your head, get back into your heart, and be like, this is how I'm feeling. Okay, I'm not going to beat myself up for that. I'm not going to think of myself as less for that. Because, again, I'm complete and I'm enough exactly as I am. I would like to grow, and I would like to learn, and I'd like to be even more. And once you're in that perspective, then when you encounter that thing that's like, okay, this is the way I'm feeling, and maybe I don't really like this feeling, you're not going to come at it from a change it immediately, or I judge myself, or I'm stupid because of this, or whatever it is. Because think about it, if you were to tell a kid, and so often we need to treat ourselves way more like we treat kids, because if a kid was saying like, I'm really insecure in this area, you wouldn't say like, yeah, you're stupid, yeah, you're an idiot, because Is that going to make them feel better? Is that going to make them more secure? No, what you're going to say is, I understand that you might be feeling insecure in this area, but you are enough exactly as you are. And that ultimately, that's the lesson that you're going to try to tell that kid that you believe is the truth. So then why don't you give yourself that same grace? And if you don't give yourself that same grace, then do you really mean it when you're telling it to the kid? Or even more importantly, is the kid going to really believe it if they don't see you living that way?
I think it's also important to try to live like kids, in the sense of like just being present in the moment. I think that's a lot of the common themes that you were kind of pointing at, which is just being present with yourself, being present and grateful just to have woken up this morning. All those desires that you want in life, at the end of the day, you only want one if you're like sick and in a deathbed, and that is just to get better. So it goes to show that at the end of the day, just being alive and breathing in it of itself is something very much to be grateful for. Mm-hmm. And I think as kids, they're very much in the moment people.
Yeah.
They just live in the moment. They care about what's going on in front of them. And of course, I'll probably get a bunch of people, or the millions of people that are going to say, yo, that doesn't work in the real world, right? Like, absolutely. But like, you got to try to abide by that and live by that as much as you can. If you are a forklift driver, right? Of course, do your job, focus on what you're doing at the time, right? But be present with yourself, be present in the moment. Don't think about other things that are going on in the world. Don't clutter your head with whatever jargon and nonsense is going on in the world, because then that will help in the sense of like, when you go or you have certain troubles or ailments that are going on in your life, when someone does come to you and tells you certain things about how you can fix yourself or perspectives, right? I hope that you kind of take it not at face value, but you kind of see it from an honest perspective. And I think that's something that's also just slacked, and I think we talked about earlier, which is that honesty part of it. But overall, I think being present, appreciating, and being grateful is something that I got a lot. Like, just what you were giving off is just be grateful for what you have, even though you might not have your dreams, you might not have everything you desire. Be grateful to have what you have now. So
yeah, and especially because if you start to define your identity based off of those things, then you like, so say that you're a forklift driver and you feel like you have to be serious. So then you maybe, for this example, as a contradiction, you're not focusing on being grateful on the present moment and living like a kid and all that kind of stuff. But in some ways, if you start to define your identity by what you do, then ultimately you're gonna fail. You're gonna make mistakes. We're not perfect. And so that means that you're a failure and that you make mistakes, and that, and if you think, oh, I have to be perfect or whatever, versus if you go back to that introspective, how do I want to define my identity? Then when you fail, it's like, okay, that happened, that sucks, I'm feeling this way, but how can I grow from this? And then that thing becomes a 5-minute moment that you learned something from, versus a existential identity crisis.
Yeah, when it comes to identities, it's something that I wanted to bring up even prior to this conversation, but it's been almost just... It's funny how when you think of something, it just almost comes up naturally, just because it's like in the forefront of your brain. But I think that is something that I've had firsthand experience recently regarding identifying with my physical abilities and physical power that I had prior to my surgery when it came to like my ankle. And I spoke about this in my last podcast, where I really, in a sense, my self-esteem went like basically rock bottom in the moments of me just being in my bed and not being able to be able and physical, because I identified so heavily with that aspect of my life, the fact that I can go hiking and I can do adventurous thing. And then next I got 2 weeks of just laying in bed and eating poorly, or choosing to eat poorly, consuming bad things, right? So like, then next my physique and the things that I used to hold myself to went kind of as well, right? And then next I started to realize that like I had a very fragile confidence at the time. It wasn't something that was rooted in my like spirit, I guess, because in a sense I would say that a spirit is in a sense the thing that is harder for people to take away, or the least not time dependent, but what is like
your most
like
personal
physically wise, like time will take over. I will start getting fat, I'll start getting old, I'll start getting weaker, I'll start losing mobility, right?
Yeah.
So that in a sense,
or
has
you'll
its,
have bad ankles. Ultimately you just don't have control over it.
yeah, I don't have much control over physical things. Mental wise and spirit is, I think, where I think you have the most control of everlasting strength.
Yeah.
Compared to physically wise, you really won't. And the fact that I identified with it really kind of was teaching me something about myself, of like, I need to even now I try to live more on the sense of like, I need to be comfortable with my body at all stages, regardless of where I'm at, and just be loving to myself regardless of where I'm at in life. Of course I want to strive to get better, and of course I want to strive to be the best physically I can, but I can't hold certain ideals to myself. And in a sense, I could almost look back and almost predict that this was going to happen, because I almost, in so many ways of life, I saw myself, and that was who I was. I had this image or this ego, identity, call it what you may, that I attached myself to, and as soon as that broke, I broke. And that's what, in a sense, I learned something from it, where it was like, I need to found or create a foundation in a place that isn't as fragile as a physical body. Yeah. And I think that's where I'm gravitating to, and just being loving to myself regardless of if anyone else loves me. As long as I love myself, at the end of the day I could die alone and love myself, and I think that in a sense would be a fulfilling life to me, as long as I'm happy and I love myself and I experience every second of every day in whatever condition I'm in. I think that's the true value of things. And I think as soon as you identify with either being the best at your job, or the best athlete in your team, right? As soon as you start identifying with these things, and as soon as something occurs that no longer puts you in that position, you start really starting to feel like shitty. But if, in a sense, you were the best athlete in your team, but you didn't identify yourself or think of yourself as that, but you valued yourself in other aspects of life, I think that's when you'd start to see that even if your body broke down, you would still be the same person, have the same confidence regardless of what happens. So I guess when it comes to lessons, it's better to learn them when you don't have to suffer the consequences. So this is one of those instances where I want to tell everyone, like, don't make your identity, or don't attach yourself to an identity that is fragile or can't easily be,
or it's not within your control, or...
Yeah, there's like a word I'm trying to think of, like, where it has an expiration date to it. Like, I feel like even though when you die, like, obviously your mind, your spirit, or not obviously, I can't say that just blatantly, but I want to say that, like, just things stop there, right? We'll make that assumption just for the thought experiment, but I would like to say that your thought process and the way of thinking are still in the same, more intact than your physical body going into an older age. So I think a really cool aspect to add to that is I find that when you do step into that, and when you are confident, and when you are sure of who you are, and that's not based on like a comparison thing, or a being better than, like, if your confidence is not, I'm good at this because I'm better than all these people, and again, it has nothing to do with all these other people, it's purely just within yourself. The beautiful thing is that you do start attracting people, right? Whether that be friendships or a significant other or whatever it is, that it's really convenient that it's not like, okay, well, if I'm just confident in myself and I just die alone, then that's just going to be how it is. And it's not like that's the trend that we see, is that, okay, once people start prioritizing themselves and they have that confidence, they just live on their own. It's like, no, usually that's where you find your people. That's where you find those friend groups that you connect with and that make you feel whole. That's where you find that significant other that, like, comes to you because you're full in who they are and they're full in, or you're full in yourself and they're full in who they are, and then you can kind of go on this journey and, like, peak together. So it's really a nice thing that it's not a direct correlation between prioritizing yourself and confidence and loneliness. You know? I think it's just like the minimum. That's like the minimum viable product to me.
But it's
so
like once you're okay with that, then like anything
the doors
else is
are
great.
open. And then at that point, yeah, as soon as you realize that that is what makes you great and you love that and you're now comfortable in that state, then now it really does make you appealing to, or other people find that attractive and or gravitate towards that energy. Action. I'm gonna start back with rapid fire questions. I think overall I've really benefited me personally in a couple things and how I've thought previously. So I hope other people as well. I mean, I don't even hope. I know that they will if they have the right mindset. So if you don't, then you don't have the right mindset. And I'm just calling you out at this point. So check yourself, because I gained something from today's experience. So let me.
Well, and that's a great point. Just before we dive into all those questions,
yeah.
Is that as soon as you find yourself offended, or I think a good word in today's day and age is triggered.
Mm-hmm.
It's at least worth taking that step back and asking why. And just thinking, it doesn't mean that what the person did is wrong or right or anything like that. But again, going back to what you control and asking yourself those questions, being introspective, it's like, oh, why did I feel this way about this? And then from that place, deciding like how to feel, or whether you need to analyze a little bit deeper, or whether you need to have a conversation with whoever made you feel that way. So
I think that's a great take-home practice, comfort challenge. I have various ones that I've heard before, and that's a great one, right? If you ever feel offended or triggered, ask yourself, why did you feel offended or triggered, and if it's something that you can control and make better for yourself. I have a slew of questions, so give me a number between 1 and 10.
7.
1, 2, 3,
8,
4, 5, 6, 7, 8. What is your proudest accomplishment?
Oh man, I hate questions like this. They do this at the conference all the time. They're like, just put yourself in that place where you're like in your proudest moment. And actually at the conference I had met Rob Gronkowski and like talked to him for a little bit, and he was like right below me in my seats, and I'm like sitting back thinking like, in comparison to Rob, man, like my greatest accomplishments, let's see. Like
Pebbles.
Yeah,
Pebbles.
I know. I'm like, this guy has like a million things that he can list. But it was a great thought experiment of being like, yeah, like as defined by like the world, but you know, like
to you in your world.
And to me in my world. One of my proudest accomplishments, that was the question.
Yeah.
Yeah, like right after college, I experienced like depression for the real first time, to the point where like I didn't want to get out of bed. I didn't see a point of getting out of bed. I was just in a really down, negative place. Like could literally care less if I died. I wasn't at the point where like I'm gonna like take my own life, but like I don't care if I get in an accident or something, you know. And I didn't dwell in that place, and that's really when I went on this whole journey of saying yes to going to Mexico and finding Tony Robbins and like putting myself out there and figuring out who I was and figuring out what identity is, and kind of asking myself like what I wanted from life, and thinking about that being like 4 years ago. By no means have I accomplished all those things or figured out a lot, but I feel like I'm more in control of my emotions. And depression is a place that I can choose. I understand that there's also levels of chemical imbalance for sure, but for me personally, it was a place that I could choose, and I chose differently. And from the outside, there's not a whole lot of things that are going differently in my life. Like for sure I've manifested and put effort into doing some things differently, but for whatever reason, the path that I'm on in life, I found myself externally in a fairly similar position, and because of that shift in mindset and identity, I'm in a totally different position. So I'm very proud of that.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I think like relative, or like there shouldn't be a comparison in your forethought when you were thinking about it, because
right?
in a sense it's just like one of those things that like in itself, the story and like what you just said is very powerful and very much something to be proud of and put on your chest, and or like put on a mantle in a sense. Like, this is me. Like, this is me, and this is the worst I've been, and look where I'm at now, Yeah. So I think that's very much, thank you for opening up and telling me that.
Yeah.
Another number between 1 and 20.
13.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. What are your creative outlets?
I really love painting.
I just got into that.
Yeah.
Acrylic or water paints or watercolors?
I love watercolors because it's like a little bit easier. It's a little bit more of a creative outlet because like you don't have as much control over how it's going to turn out because as it dries, like it changes and it evolves. But the paintings that I like the most are definitely my oil paints. Oil painting is like a really cool medium. I also really enjoy calligraphy and writing. Not writing like...
Do you have good handwriting?
Actually writing, yeah. I do.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm pretty good at calligraphy. Not great, but pretty good.
I didn't know that about you.
And then workouts. I feel like I like the creativity involved in like planning your own workouts, and kind of like designing your own way of exercising, and then singing. I like singing just by myself.
To yourself?
By myself, yeah.
Who doesn't? Actually, I feel like there's some people that do.
At the Tony Robbins conference, dude, they made us like sit around, like stand around holding hands singing, "Can you feel the love?"
I've never heard that song.
Yes, you have. It's from Lion King.
Okay, I must have heard it when I was very young and didn't recall.
Okay, well, we all stood around, like... And this is the thing about those conferences that are crazy, is like... Oh,
would you recommend them?
I would definitely recommend them. And, like, one of the things...
Did you just save up for these things? Because I'm assuming it's a pretty penny, but you saved up for it, you made the dedication, you wanted to go, and you made it happen.
And I would say, again, take a step back and ask why. Like, do you want to change your life? Like, are you really in a position where you're going to, like, implement these things and change your life? Because this conference is not going to change your life. Like, it'll bring up great perspectives, and it will be an awesome week. Like, you'll feel lit up and on fire. But if there isn't a certain level of ownership over the change that you want to make, and I'm speaking from experience, you won't do anything about it. So they're not magic by any means. But they equip you with all of the tools that you need to implement, like, everything that we've talked about. So... If you want to go to the conference for a quick fix, it's probably not worth your money.
Be cautious of a quick get rich scheme, and it turns out you will be the scheme. Yeah. All right, another number give me 2 numbers between 10. Actually, that's a lie, because that would be absurd if you said 99. I'd be like, I don't have that many questions. Actually, I'm going to choose one.
I was going to say 1, but...
I'm going to choose one. Trivia music start now. Let's see.
Trivia music. Oh, trivia music. I
or like
Jeopardy.
We're gonna
ask you if you know these songs. I'm like, oh my gosh, dude, I don't know anything about music.
No. I'm not gonna go there because I suck at that as well. Wow. I don't know. I guess I should just choose number 1. Who are your role models growing up?
Growing up?
Mm-hmm.
I think my parents, for sure. I feel very blessed that I had good parents.
What about now?
Now? I obviously like Tony Robbins. I like Joe Dispenza. I like that he kind of pushes the limits on...
Joe Dispenza.
Yeah.
Okay. What like medium does he most like put himself out in?
So he attempts to prove the power of manifestation through quantum physics.
Ooh.
And he uses quantum physics to prove why manifestation makes sense and why positive thinking makes sense on a particle level within our physical beings, and uses that to describe the world. If you read any of his books, I wouldn't suggest audiobooks because they're kind of dense and they talk a lot about like theoretical physics.
Okay. If you're into that, go for it. But
no, if you're into
it's not
it,
to the,
like that's.
I feel like it's a very small niche that is into metaphysics or like super physical things.
But he tries to make it in a really practical way, and you get that when you read it. But when you're like listening to it, like I find, like I loved the book. I read it. I wanted to read it again. I got the audiobook. Puts me to sleep every single time because it's different than when you're like, it's kind of like if you're reading a textbook on something that you're interested in. Then it's interesting, right? Because it's full of information. You can pause, you can highlight, you can go back and forth. But you'd never just like listen to an audiobook of a textbook because the point is to learn and to take time to meditate on the different things that you're learning. And it's kind of like that where it's like, it just kind of gets dry.
No, absolutely.
But
so, Joe Dispenza.
The thing I like about him is that he started as a chiropractor. He got into a really bad car accident, messed up his whole body, decided, I'm going to heal myself. This is ridiculous. I don't want to live like this. I don't want this to define the rest of my life. And he, like, through the power of thought, kind of started healing himself. And he wanted to figure out why and how that works. And so then he started diving into neurology and quantum physics. And he really pushes the boundaries of, like, he really blends really nicely these abstract concepts like manifestation and concrete concepts like science and brings them together. And so yeah, I really like that. And then Tim Mackey, I really adore him. He is the founder of the Bible Project on YouTube. Highly advise anybody who's on a religious journey to check that out. And
Christian.
He's Christian. But similar kind of thing where like he didn't just grow up Christian and just like fall into that and decide that. Like his whole life, he consciously made the effort to dive into like the theology and the philosophy behind it, and he believes in those concepts fundamentally to his core because of that research, and he has a really beautiful and elegant connective way of describing the Bible and the story of the Bible, not from a religious standpoint, but more from if this book is real, it's attempting to describe what life is and how to live life, and it's telling a story. So here's a new way of kind of looking at that. And I'm sure there's like a million more people, but...
So Tim Mackey, we have Joe Dispenza, and Tony Robbins.
Yeah, as far as like... and I freaking love Joe Rogan.
Joe Rogan. Shout out Joe Rogan, absolutely. That's the reason I started podcasts. That was the first podcast I listened to was Joe Rogan, and to this day I still listen to Joe Rogan.
Yeah, I love how
he's present.
He creates
he's
space.
Present and he's himself. Is kind of what I like about him.
He does a lot of the things that we're talking about, and he creates space for conversation, which is a beautiful commodity in our world these days.
I would not disagree with you in any sense. He is an awesome person.
And then, my freaking grandma, dude. That lady is freaking badass. She's like...
What's her name?
Linda.
Linda what? Jones?
Palmer.
Linda Palmer.
Yeah.
Shout out her.
Yeah. She,
this is going to be eternal for life.
She did a 3-minute and 10-second plank today.
Oh, shit. At what age?
She's gotta be like 85.
Oh,
yeah, dude.
Shit.
She mows her whole lawn, chops her own wood. And her lawn is like an Alaska lawn, so there's like ditches and trees and stubs. And she got her hip replaced and just...
She's trucking.
Powers through, dude. She chops her own wood, like...
So she's sovereign.
Yeah, she lives alone. Like, she's just...
That's what I've come to realize, in a sense, that is what makes a long life, whether you want that or not. My grandma's in a sense the very much the same way. She's also very hardworking for the age that she's at. She should not be raking her front porch. She should not be doing a lot of the things she's doing, but she's still doing them and she's still living. So that should almost make a very strong correlation that that's what should be done. But here's another example: 85, 3.5-minute plank. Most Americans, I want to say, can't even do that. So shout out to her. And at 85, and she's mowing these lawns in Alaska, which is not a particularly good climate to be in, just in general, for any American.
Yeah, and my grandpa, on the other side, my grandpa Jones, he is 90, and he's very similar. He owns a 100-acre golf course, manages the whole in Alaska.
100 acres? That's a fuck ton.
It's a crazy story. But he manages like the whole thing by himself, does all the hard labor, fixes everything, plays pickleball for 3 hours every single day. And the biggest lesson that I've learned is don't stop moving. Like, you want to do something, continue to do it. And your body will continue to provide for you. Doesn't mean you won't deteriorate. His spine is super weak, and he has to be kind of cautious of that. But ultimately, as soon as you feel like I can't and you stop moving, well, then you won't be able to, and you'll get stiff. And that's not to indict anybody who's not at that point, because everybody's, again, on their own journey, and their bodies are all different. But I have definitely found a correlation between people that I know who are that age, and they've just resigned themselves to being old and dying and the way that they live, versus people who are like, age is a number, I'm just going to keep on going until I can't go anymore. Mm-hmm. So it's like a proverb. It's a probability.
Probability. I like it. That's a good mnemonic method to remembering that word, proverb, because I always mix that between an aphorism and there's another one that's very similar to that. I feel like
draconian is a difficult word for us because we're not super...
I mean, it was a challenge to try to use it. I feel like we're being draconian about it, the fact that we can't.
No, it's just that we're not super negative. We don't call people out on their negative stuff. We don't
harsh or severe.
We don't point out negative.
I guess people can be draconian to themselves.
Yes.
There we go.
Nice.
We did it.
Don't be draconian towards yourself.
Yeah, don't be a Draco or a Drake.
Ooh.
Or,
do you think
don't
that's
be a Grecian.
Why she named Draco?
Maybe.
He's quite draconian.
He is. He's very severe.
Yeah.
And wants the whole world to burn. Even though he himself is very hurt and very much evil himself.
The only reason that he was doing that is because his identity was skewed in the eyes of his parents. His needs were all out of whack as terms of significance, and he could have been a really great guy, and I think that was kind of the point at the end, was that ultimately he really was.
I'm going to look that up. Draco from Harry Potter, name... Origin? I like that.
I feel like they're going to be like...
Origin.
You could try origin, but they might just say the origin of the name Draco.
Draco's first name is Latin for dragon, which says something about how his parents thought about power, and it's also name given to an Athenian lawmaker known for his harsh and strict laws, which is a reflection of how Draco treats people around him. Draconian. Yay! There we go! You learn something new every day. Again, really I think we're just out here popping mind thoughts out here.
Yeah.
Okay, let's see. I have a couple more, and we'll set it to cruise control. What is a quote that you like? Is there any quote? Anything that comes to mind? I think that's a tough question, but...
For some people, it's not. Like my sister, again, she like freaking loves
Sophisticated
poetry and quotes.
Margaret?
She just she'll just like sit here and give you poems. And it's like, you memorize these. That's awesome. I'm not a super big quote person, but I always go back to the Dr. Seuss quote of, be who you are and say what you feel, and those who mind don't matter, and those who matter don't mind. And I actually quoted that at my commencement speech in college, and the dean came in after, and he was like, well, never thought we'd hear someone quote Dr. Seuss.
I was like, no one knew that. Or did you tell him it was Dr. Seuss?
Yeah, I said it was Dr. Seuss, but I'm also like...
Why would he say that? That dude's an asshole. I was like, dude, Dr. Seuss is tight. What are you talking about?
Beyond that, like, he's an extremely successful, like, entrepreneur who, like... I mean,
but still, like,
author,
who else should I quote? Fucking Steve Jobs? Okay, cool. What's the difference between him and fucking Dr. Seuss? Various things, but at the same time, very creative people.
Dr. Seuss is more well-known, you know, like, around the world, probably.
I actually don't know about that now.
For longer.
At that time, I would say, or what year was that? 2012?
Yeah, that was 2012, yeah. 2013, yeah.
2013? Mm-hmm. I would say Dr. Seuss was equally as popular because the iPhone came out in 2006, 2007, one of those years.
Yeah.
Granted, the iPod and all that shit was around prior to that as well. I don't know. That's a stat that I don't know, and I don't think Google can provide. So I'm not going to dwell on that anymore. What is a song that you have been playing or has been just on repeat for you?
Lots of songs, but there's this one song now I'm gonna blank on the guy's name.
If you want my Spotify, I could let you borrow it, and you could type away whatever you want.
It's by Wells. I don't know. I have this on this playlist. Anyway, it's called Fully Known, and it's been one of my top songs for a while.
Fully Known?
Yeah, by Torrin Wells. Actually, I'm not sure if it's... I think it might just be called Known.
All right, before I play it, just FYI, I'm going to put a link to it or some sort of thing on the video so you can click on it and you can figure it out. I'm going to play it for us, but I can't play it for everyone else, or else I'll have like some copyright thing where like I can't monetize this video. Not that I will monetize it, but I'm going to play it and then snip this part out. So it'll be somewhere in the video.
Yeah. So
right here somewhere. The
reason that I really like this song and the reason that like speaks to me is because I think in a lot of ways it balances these things that we've been talking about, whether it's towards yourself, towards another person, towards God, whatever it is. It's a Christian song.
Mm-hmm.
I mostly listen to Christian music.
Okay.
But it's talks about, like, I wish I could remember the quote that he used. I like heard him on the radio one time, and it was such a great quote. But like, since it's not his quote, I haven't been able to find it. Mm-hmm. But it essentially was talking about to be fully known and not loved is heartbreaking. To be fully loved and not known is lonely. But to be fully known and fully loved is the closest thing that you can get to God's love. And I think that that's the journey that we're on with ourselves, is don't love yourself for who you think you should be or who you think that you could be. Like, know yourself exactly as you are. And that, again, full circle goes back to what we're talking about with ask yourself those questions. Like, spend time with yourself. Like, be introspective. And then once you, on that journey of, like, knowing yourself, just love yourself for exactly who you are. Like, when we're talking about being triggered, it's like something I've been on a journey of is like, why am I feeling this emotion? I'm not very good at processing my emotions. This is how I'm feeling. I love you. Okay, I love you. I might not like this emotion, but I love you. And I think it's also something that you should strive for in a significant other, is to know them and to love them. And I also think that is God's love towards us. I think that he created us exactly as we're meant to be, and he knows every single most intimate facet of your life and loves us exactly as we are.
It seems like your life, in a sense, is very much affected and or affects every aspect of it, even in music, which is pretty cool.
Life is a big complex puzzle.
But it's all, yeah. I was like, hold on. I can't process that at the same time while I'm trying to like process the fact that like you also integrate your philosophies and ideologies into even the simplest form of music, right? So that kind of goes to show how well tied and or I guess everything you do is connected in one sense or another, which I don't think most people do. I for sure would have to say I follow along the same lines, where I do listen to things that make me think of like my current life and like the way I'm thinking in certain ideologies, but most of the time they're just hype music. I'm just like, yo, let's go. This is tight.
I mean, I definitely listen.
And I'm not telling you that you're not.
If I could think of like a hype song, oh man.
You don't have to, but if you want to,
saying,
yeah.
Like, Get Out of Your Mind. Oh man, that freaking song pumps me up. I listen.
Get Out of Your Mind by Little John.
Yeah.
Okay.
I freaking love that song.
What year was that? Like 2007? Steve Jobs, iPhone, at the same time. Just about. That was an epic year. We didn't even know it. Yeah. What is some advice you'd give yourself 5 years ago? So that would be in 2016.
I think, I think partly I would say, like, I kind of wish I would have stayed in college a little bit longer and done a little bit more school, because once you're in college and you have like your prereqs and you have certain classes, like like I needed another semester to major in physics. It would have just opened up another door and it wouldn't have been too much more expensive. I probably needed another year to major in sociology or something like that, just because of like the classes that I took. So on a more superficial outside perspective, I think that would have been like pretty good advice. But at the same time, I'm where I'm at and I'm on the journey that I'm in because I took that path. But I think I would just say like to exactly what we're talking about. Like just, I wish I would have just loved myself a little bit more. And I wish I would have accepted, I will not say wish, but I would advise myself to accept myself a little bit more and not to define myself so much by what other people say. But to add to that, I don't know that I really would have listened. I think I kind of needed, we kind of know that, right? We always kind of know that, but I think I needed the journey of life that I went on to not just know it, but to understand it and be able to live it. And I'm not there yet, but yeah.
What is your expectation and for 5 years now looking forward? Like, what would you want to tell not that you're going to tell yourself because that's almost impossible. What do you foresee for yourself in 5 years?
Everything that I just said, I think it's time to like truly live that.
Okay.
I don't have a huge expectation as far as like career or growth or money and another thing that's important about the personality types is that's particularly something that like mine and our personality type doesn't necessarily value really highly. But if you're a personality type that does value those things, also be true to yourself. That's not a bad thing. You know, like we need people to make the world go around. We need people motivated by money. Like it doesn't have to be a bad thing as long as it's something that you choose for yourself. But my point is that that's not really where I'm looking forward in the future. Like regardless of where I am or what I'm doing, like I really want to be happy on the day-to-day basis. And I think ultimate freedom is every single day I get to choose how I want to feel about that day. And that doesn't mean that like negative feelings won't happen, but I'm in a place where I'm secure in who I am and in my identity, that I can observe those things, I can learn from those things, I can forgive those things, I can move on. And I really like the concept that life is just today repeated. So like you don't have to think about the next 5 years or 10 years as some complicated thing. It's in 5 years, if I want to be doing this, I do that today. A little bit today. And then life is just today repeated.
I think Abby from 5 years from now will be very proud that you made that decision and are living by that decision. Yeah. Do you have anything you want to plug? Anything you wish people could do? This is, I guess, any way people want to reach you, if they want to reach you, anything of that nature?
I put out 7 books.
Okay, 7 books. The Abby Jones Chronicles.
No, I don't really have anything. I just advise that people...
And before you go there, I want to ask you the next question, which is if you could give a tweet to close, as a closing remarks, if you were going to put a tweet, 140 characters, what would it be regarding what you want to say?
I would quote the genie from Aladdin and say, just be yourself. Do you know what scene it is?
I've never watched that show.
No, okay, so it's when so the premise is that Aladdin like sees this beautiful woman and he like wants to be with her, and then he finds this genie, and then the genie grants him wishes, but he can't make her fall in love with him. And so he's like, okay, well then I want to be a prince. And then there's this whole elaborate parade and everything, and then he's like gonna go see her. He's like, and he's a street rat, right? Like he lives on the street and he's like a nobody. And he's like,
spoiler alert, everybody! I just gotta.
No, that's the whole point. The whole point is that he's like a nobody. That's like from the very beginning. He's a street rat. It's the first song of the whole thing is like street rat. Anyway,
I was gonna say you way to ruin the whole thing for me. Now I'm not gonna watch it.
And there's this one scene, kind of in the beginning,
and
he's like talking to the genie, and he's like, I don't know what I'm gonna do. Like I'm nobody. Like I'm not a prince. I'm not any of these things. And the genie, so that he can't be seen, he turns himself into a little bee, and he's like flying around him, and he's like, just be yourself. And he's like, oh, get out of here, and he like swats him away. But that's like the premise of the movie is like love and relationships and who you are is so much deeper than your socioeconomic status or what you have on the outside. It's who you are.
I like that.
So I like that. Yeah, I like that a lot.
There was a we had a thread of tweets there. I like the initial one, and then the explanation of tweets I think was very much needed.
Do not ask me rapid fire questions and expect answers. You should definitely.
No, I mean that's how Twitter works. You could read a book on Twitter. Granted, it'll take forever to scroll through that thing, but you can do it.
You've done it probably. I've done. I know.
I've
been
actually,
man, I am committed to this.
I've never actually gone deeper than like two threads.
I don't have Twitter. I've never been on Twitter. But like when someone posts something to Instagram, I then realize, oh, this must be a tweet that someone posted in multiple sets of tweets. That's.
I think that's most of the time with social media, right? It just like feeds off of one another. Of course, there's like one social media that gets the slops, but most of the time it's just like everything feeds off of one another.
Yeah.
But no, I'm absolutely grateful to have been sitting here today and conversating. I think we've tried to make this conversation happen multiple times. I've for sure dropped the ball a couple of times, so like
I canceled it the first 2 times.
So like absolutely, it's one of those things that when it happens, it happens, and I'm just happy that it happened. I'm grateful to have had the conversation, and I really hope a lot of people get the same value that I got out of it today. So absolutely, thank you, and continue to be yourself.
Yeah. You too.
All right.
Thank you. Thanks for doing this.
Of course. So that's kind of it.
You can stop it on your phone.
Yeah, I can't stop it from here. I wish I had that type
can.
of geekiness. What?
You
Stop
just have to get
phone?
from the GoPro app.
Oh, you know what? I could stop both of them in a sense.
So